Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Chris from Felgrau Productions, and we're here for the second part in our two-part review of the new Pendraken 10mm Russo-Japanese War figures. Previously, we looked at the Japanese and also the very small Chinese contingent. Now we're looking at what I think are equally as great, but more versatile Russians for the Russo-Japanese War. So if you go online to pendraken.co.uk, that's Pendraken with a K, Pendraken, .co.uk. You can find these under Russo-Japanese War, so you can follow along and see all the codes. There's a lot in here, so I'm not going to mention exactly what numbers they all are, but I am going to go in numerical order, starting with R1, or technically it's RJR for Russo-Japanese Russians. But I'm just going to refer to them as R1, R2, and so on and so forth. Now, in my last video, I introduced the 5-point scale I'm using, and I am just grading these holistically from 1 to 5, 5 being these are fantastic and you should buy them if you're interested in this particular area, 1 being absolute trash, and 3 being they're good, they're fine, they'll get the job done. I am specifically looking at, in roughly order of importance, sculpt quality, cleanup, the ease of assembly, variety of poses, and are they easy and fun to paint? And in rough order of importance, but it might depend more on your project of, if you're doing a 28mm diorama, the variety of poses and how easy or fun to paint might be more important than some other things. Right off the bat, I'll just say these are much like the Japanese, and they are the same line. 5 is out of 5s. They're awesome. They have absolute great sculpt quality. And here, looking at number 1, you can see on these figures, and these are the early war infantry in tunics. They're absolutely great quality. You can see faces, and I know in 10mm the faces are always going to look a little bit funny, but I've painted a ton of 10mm. A Russo-Japanese War alone, I've done over 1,000 of these figures in a commission for somebody else. Also, as an asterisk, these figures I did not buy. They are from Pendraken, a commission for Pendraken. However, I put my money where my mouth is. I bought these. It says World War I Russo-Japanese War. They are, in fact, or World War I Russian Civil War. They are Russo-Japanese War. I'll be using them for World War I and Russian Civil War. So really great quality. And because they're a little bit almost pre-modern, you also get the command. So you've got some really great command that you can mix in. We've got this very dramatic officer right here. You can see his pistol holster really sculpted in. Everything looks great. We've got drummers, we've got standard bearers, and we've got buglers. I'm going to be a little honest, I'm not wild about this running bugler pose, although there are other poses you can use if you don't like these, but you've got the variety so that you can have these command figures mixed in amongst your regular infantry. Even more variety. The Russians modernized their uniforms over the course of the war, so these are tunics for the these are the late war summer kit as opposed to the tunics for the early war. So you've got even more sculpts. I think at 10mm, it's hard to tell a difference between the tunics of the early war and the summer kit of the late war, so you could probably mix them together or just use them to represent different units. But that's totally up to you and how much of a stickler you are for historical accuracy. I am not an expert in the Russo-Japanese War, and I'm not even going to be using these for you, Russo-Japanese War. We also have number 4 command in summer kit, same kind of figures with a bugler in a less dynamic or at least less dramatic pose, drummer, standard bearer, and a little bit less of a dramatic gun in the air officer, but still a pretty good sculpt there. Now, one of the reasons I think these Russians are absolutely fantastic, and not to say that the Japanese are not fantastic, they are, but the Russians are going to be a lot more versatile, is I'm already on the 5th kit, infantry and winter kit, and there's like, how many of these? There's 31. There's 31 codes. And this is number 5. And not a lot of them are like, oh, well, that's a weird code. No one's ever going to use that. There's codes that you'll use, almost all of them. So now, obviously, we're looking at winter kit. You can see they've got scarves wrapped around them, so you can't really see their faces. You've got the big fuzzy Russian hats. No, I don't know what that's called. And big coats. So these are going to be great. And you could use these in so many wars that the Russians are involved in the early 20th century. Obviously, the Russo-Japanese War, but also World War I, and also the Russian Civil War. And I bet if you mix some of these into World War II, some people would not even notice, especially the ones wearing, some people would, others wouldn't. You have command in winter kit. Here's another, I keep dropping them. Here's another dramatic guy. See, I think this guy would look great as like a World War II commissar, too, with his gun in the air. And then you could have a big dramatic flag guy. So really lots and lots of options here. And we're not even done. We're not even done with the basic infantry. Here is RJR Frontier Guard, right? So these are wearing the big hats, but they've also got kind of summer kit on. Another officer dramatically pointing. Could use these as Cossacks or just winter uniforms, or as the Frontier Guard, obviously. Now they do not, the Frontier Guard do not have their own command, but we're not done with regular infantry. We have sailors. We have sailors. You know, Russo-Japanese War, the sailors that revolt, and I'm blanking on the name of the ship. We have a sailor officer. We've got two different sailors. The sailor caps look different from the regular caps. So variety of pose is off the charts. I feel like I need to invent a score. I just invented this 5-point scale. I need to give it a 6 out of 5 in variety of scale. There's so many. We've got um, a bomb thrower, grenade thrower. This is code number 9. Um, Complaint so minor it's barely a complaint. He only comes in summer uniform. He doesn't come in winter uniform or as a Cossack. Is that a big deal? No, there's so many different codes. But if you wanted to put him in, say, a winter uniform or a Cossack outfit, he's going to stick out a little bit. So you might have to avoid that. Same thing with number 10, the Madsen machine gun. And of course, you could mix in machine guns from other Pendraken lines like their World War One or their Russian Civil War lines. But they only come in the summer uniform. They do not come in the winter uniform. So ever so minor issue there. Not done though. Madsen light machine gun team. I feel like I'm getting all my critiques out in a row here. With the Madsen machine gun team, they look great. They only come in this winter uniform instead of the summer uniforms. And I said this with the Japanese, the barrel on the Madsen light machine gun here is so thin. I'm really afraid this thing's going to fall off. And I put a little super glue at the joint between where it joins the rest of the gun so that it won't fall off. I think that helps, but I'm honestly not really 100% sure. I think that's out of room for complaints. One areas where the Russians, I think, stand out more than the Japanese is that the Russians have more variety of cavalry. This is Russians 12, cavalry with lance. Now, if you remember the Japanese, they had 4 different sculpts, an officer, a standard bearer, a musician, and the normal cavalry. This only has 2, but there's more codes. So we have an officer here, waving or commanding, and then we've got lance, because these are cavalry lances. However, then we also have cavalry with swords. So you can mix the lances and the swords together, or you can leave them as separately. They do share the same officer, though. So you are going to get duplicated officers, but you don't get as many officers as you do figures, regular figures. Now, if you're doing a lot of cavalry in your army, there is dismounted cavalry. You could also mix these in with your infantry if you want more variety, if you cannot tell the difference. Even more variety in cavalry. Can't have Russians without Cossacks. And here's the officer with the sword and the regular figure with the lance. Although Leon does accept special orders, so you could just order a bunch of officers with swords if you wanted more of a variety of lances and swords mixed together. And once again, dismounted Cossacks. So you could field an entire Cossack army using just the dismounted Cossacks, and then I would probably recommend, for a little bit of variety, mixing in the R7 Frontier Guard. You'd have the big fuzzy hats, and they almost look like Cossacks wearing winter gear and Cossacks wearing warmer gear. And you can mix those all together. And speaking of Frontier Guard, we even have, running out of space to put these down, there's so many of them, Frontier Guard Cavalry. This is number 17. So again, you can mix these in with the Cossacks and get even more variety. Not done yet with the cavalry. Horse holders. Now, are you going to need these on the battlefield? Not necessarily, although this guy makes a fantastic Cossack or Frontier Guard or just winter officer. And then you can these guys holding the horses in like a little diorama or victory points in a camp kind of area. So look really fantastic. I'm actually going to skip some of the artillery and we'll come back to it. This is number 27. We have a trench mortar if you want it. Don't come in winter. And then like the Japanese, we also have a field telephone for good diorama or terrain purposes. And then high command. And again, like the Japanese, you get 4 totally distinct high command. 2 of them mounted, one with a pretty luxurious beard, and then another who's yelling, so it's a little hard to tell. And then 2 standing guys, both in winter gear. And this guy's holding, I think, maybe like a telescope. It's a little hard to tell. A baton. And then the last two, before we get to the artillery, is the ever useful casualty marker. And I think what is one of my favorite, which is the Orthodox priest. You could use in perhaps a Russian Civil War, White Army, or any World War I or Russo-Japanese War. Now to save what I think is not necessarily the best, but one of the, in terms of sculpts, but best in terms of the offerings, is the artillery. Because although there's only two kinds of artillery, there is the 76 millimeter M1900 field gun, and then there is the 76.2 millimeter M1902 field gun. And as I said in my Japanese video, I glued this together a little funky. So that is a me thing, not a Pendraken thing. And there's a fuzz on this one. It's a little bit straighter. The gun mantlet, or the shield, is sculpted and cast as part of the gun. So really awesome for ease of assembly. Really great. But the real highlight of the artillery is 4 different sets of artillery crew. So depending on what kind of army you're running, you do not need to have the same artillery crew. We have summer kit. Now, they don't differentiate between the early war and the late war summer kit for the artillery. At 10 millimeter, I don't think that's a problem. And in all these cases, you're pretty much going to get guy kneeling holding ammunition, guy standing holding ammunition, guy yelling or something, and then guy shouting, or this guy, I don't know what he's doing, but he's shouting. So here's the summer kit. Then we have the winter kit, kneeling, standing with ammo, covering his ears, doing something. Then we have the Cossack crew in winter gear. And then just to round it out, the Frontier Guard crew. So many options. And that's really about everything. There's just so much use out of these Russians. Again, anything between 1900 and even pushing into World War II, although I'm going to use them, like I said, for Russian Civil War. These are really, really fantastic. You don't need to stop yourself for Russians. The Russian Empire, when it collapsed during World War I, broke up into, of course, a bunch of countries, and especially during the Russian Civil War and some of those wars of independence, like the Russo-Polish War, and against the Baltic states and Finland, and wars in Ukraine, which eventually joined the Soviet Union. The Russian uniforms made it far and wide. So you take Pendragon's 10 millimeter Russo-Japanese War figures that we have here, and you mix them with the Russian Civil War line, which is pretty small, and you mix them with their World War I line, which is somewhere in between in terms of size, and you've got all the variety you could possibly imagine, and you can have yourself a lot of different armies, and then mix in, especially because like Poland, they had a mix of German and Russian uniforms that got mixed together before they got their own Polish uniforms. You can do so much with what Pendragon has, and these Russo-Japanese War figures add so much. So 5 out of 5, strongly recommend. If you want to do anything Russian in the early 20th century, I'm eventually going to do something Russian early 20th century, although I have like 100 projects going on. And I spent my own money on this, and I'm going to spend more on it when I need to. So cannot recommend enough. If you have any questions about what you'd like to see me review next, please let me know in the comments down below. I actually have a, just before the Third Crusades, Siege of Jerusalem, Horns of Hattin, 2 armies, one Crusaders, Kingdom of Jerusalem, and one Salah al-Din. That I don't have ones for everyone on the line, but I have a lot of them. So if you're interested in me doing a video about the Crusades, not an expert in the field, but I am an expert in 10 millimeter. So let me know. And until then, I hope you all enjoy what you've got on the table.